Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Muhi Khwaja with the American Muslim Community Foundation. And on today's episode of the Muslim Philanthropy Podcast, I am honored to have our guest, Steve Sosebee from HEAL Palestine. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks for having me, Muhi. I appreciate it.
Of course. So blessed to have you on the podcast, and definitely support the work that you're doing. I think it's critical work, very much needed in the space. You've been somebody who has been leading efforts in Palestine and in the region for decades. So for you to, start this initiative and continue the work and steer through a lot of adversity and challenges. And, I think it provides hope to a lot of people. So thank you so much for doing what you do every day.
My pleasure, my honor to serve this noble cause and these brave and deserving people, people who deserve freedom and deserve justice. I'm very honored to serve their cause.
Absolutely. So just as we do with all of our guests, we want to get to know who you are. Tell us a little bit more about your life, your background, where you grew up, your family, and just walk us through the years of Steve Sosebee.
Well, I'm from a small college town in Kent, Ohio. I was born in 1965, grew up in the 70s and 80s, probably the best time to grow up in the United States, prior to social media and post-Vietnam. So it was a great time and fortunate for me to be born at that time. Growing up in a small town, my father was a high school teacher. My mom was a nurse. I have four sisters. But the town I grew up in has a social justice history, which is that it's a town called Kent, Ohio. And on May 4th of 1970, National Guardsmen shot and killed four students protesting the American involvement in Southeast Asia and the invasion of Cambodia. And that was the only university where armed guardsmen killed white students in the 60s, unarmed students. And that was a legacy that I grew up with in this small town. I wasn't old enough to remember that incident, but I grew up with it. And it kind of helped shape my worldview and as well as my parents' values, and to work for causes of social justice and to struggle for and support people who are struggling for freedom. Um, in the late 80s, while I was studying political science at Kent State University, the first Palestinian uprising began, and I was very much interested in history. I was interested in the Middle East. I was interested in social justice causes, and that particular issue became one on which I educated myself on and realized the injustice and historical injustice that the Palestinian people had been enduring and the reason for their uprising, and began working as a student activist to help share their stories and to educate my fellow students and try to bring the narrative and the position of the Palestinian people to my campus. I was selected to go in the winter break of 1988, the first year of the first Intifada, on a student delegation to the West Bank and Gaza. And it was my first time to go and see firsthand what was happening on the ground in Palestine, the injustice of the Israeli occupation, the hardship and suffering that Palestinians had to endure every day under occupation, and also their courage and resilience and their humanity, their kindness, their hospitality. The basic core beauty of the Palestinian people came through on that trip, and that's when I decided, finishing university with a degree in international relations, to go back and work in Palestine as a freelance writer. So I went back and just started to live in the West Bank as a very young man, sleeping on couches, traveling throughout the occupied territories, meeting people, hearing their stories, writing
Hmm.
for a few publications, the Washington Report on Middle East Affairs, Al Fajr English newspaper in Jerusalem at that time, Arab American News out of Dearborn, and other publications.
Sure.
I would share the stories and try to educate people about what I was seeing firsthand on the ground in Palestine. And in the course of that work, I started to meet injured children who needed medical care and they could not get in Palestine, and just started to arrange care for them in the States on a humanitarian level. I really was an activist. I wasn't really a journalist. My dedication was to the Palestinian cause and to the Palestinian people. So I was looking always for ways I could help serve the Palestinian
Mhm.
cause. and started to place kids in hospitals in the United States. These are the first injured children to come. I brought the first injured child from the West Bank, the first injured child from Gaza, placed them in hospitals, started organizing in the communities where they were being treated, take care of them, take them to their appointments, house them, give them the support they needed. And I realized it wasn't possible to do that consistently without a nonprofit organization, and started then the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. I was the founder. I then met and married a Palestinian woman in the West Bank, and she and myself started to build the organization together, and had the support of Dr. Musa and Sohaila Nasser, who helped me when I was struggling very early on in the beginning to get PCRF started and to get it growing. And for the next 17 years, my wife and I worked very hard to get this organization off the ground, to get it started. We brought hundreds of injured kids. We started doing medical missions, the first medical teams to go to Palestine. We started, and then we started to expand and grow the organization. Unfortunately, in 2009, my wife, Huda al-Masri, Ali Rahamha, passed away from cancer, leaving me with two young girls to raise. I moved back to Palestine. Although we had been living there on and off for some time, I moved back with my two daughters, Dima and Jenna, to have the support of her family to help raise them, to build PCRF. We built the first cancer department for children in Palestine in my wife's name and in her honor in Beit Jala Hospital. And then with a long struggle and through a long court system with the Israeli government, who was trying to ban me from living in Palestine, I was able to obtain a Palestinian passport as a family reunification document. So now I have a Palestinian ID, a Palestinian passport, and was able to live there as a Palestinian and experiencing the same life and discrimination for the most part that Palestinians endure.
Wow.
And as the organization grew and took off, the organization became much bigger. Things changed very fundamentally in the organization culturally. A board came in that had a different vision than mine, was interfering in operations, had kind of a toxic culture. I'm sorry to say that. And I felt that I was not able to use my experience, my leadership skills, my 30 years of living and working on the ground and building a very successful organization when October 7th happened in Gaza, and the absolute widespread destruction, the massive killing of innocent civilians, destruction of schools and infrastructure, the displacement of millions of people, the hunger, the starvation, the destruction of the health system, and the trauma that Palestinians were enduring, the struggle for food and daily survival. I had built a very successful organization called PCRF, and we had tons of
Mhm.
money. And I just couldn't get the board to spend the money and to do projects and to expand beyond a very narrow scope that they had defined, which was healthcare for children. And I thought that was great. That was fine. There's an absolute need for that. That was how I started the organization. But we needed to expand into providing education. We needed to expand into humanitarian aid and building food kitchens and delivering whatever aid was possible, and expanding into other areas that we could have an impact. And we had the resources for it, so there was no real reason not to.
Sure.
But they wouldn't. And therefore, I decided to leave in January at the end of 2023, after a few months of seeing that this massive military destruction on the Gaza people on the Gaza Strip was not going to stop. It was only getting worse. I decided to leave PCRF, an organization I built and founded and struggled to get going and make successful for 30 years with my late wife, God rest her soul. The hardest decision of my
Mhm.
life was to leave, but I had to, because my duty and my service is not to any organization. It's to a people, and it's to a struggle,
Mhm.
and it's to a cause, which is greater than myself. So I started over again from zero, with some amazing people. My wife, my second wife, who I have since remarried, Dr. Zina Salman, a pediatric oncologist from Sudan who lived in Palestine with me for many years. Tanya Nasser, the daughter of the co-founders with PCRF, Dr. Musa and Suhaila Nasser, and Shireen Karo. We all just decided to start Heal Palestine and focus on a much broader, more expansive program that not only continued with the health services, which I had built PCRF on, but also expanding into education, expanding into humanitarian aid, and taking on a new component of leadership, where our goal is really to empower young people in Gaza to take the responsibility of addressing needs in their communities and giving them the resources, mentorship, and support that enables young Palestinians to become leaders in their communities, in Heal Palestine, in all of the reconstructive work and rebuilding work that's required for Gaza in the future. So that's what HEAL stands for: health, education, aid, and leadership. It was a huge decision to leave the organization that I'd made so successful and I'd spent my life building and that I'd founded and that had the legacy of my first wife, God rest her soul. Without her, it wouldn't have existed. But it was required for me to really give full effort and full all of my time and effort and energy and experience that I had learned on the ground, living and working in Palestine and building PCRF. I put that into HEAL Palestine, and we've just been able to grow a new organization and take on the kind of work that I've always wanted to do. And although we don't have the resources that PCRF has, we're certainly using ours in a very efficient and effective way and making sure that when donors give to our organization, we're spending that money as quickly and as effectively as possible and not sitting on with huge sums of money in the bank during this immense crisis. So here we are today with this kind of shift in focus internationally, where people are now obviously looking at what's happening with the war in the Gulf, and a little bit of the attention is no most of the attention is no longer on Gaza or on Palestine, but the same conditions exist there. And we're continuing to focus our full effort and attention on providing life-saving medical care. We have field hospitals, we have clinics, we have a mental health team on the ground providing trauma services. We continue to bring children out for medical care. We brought over 60 kids to the United States for free medical care. We just sent our first two patients to Latin America. They arrived last week in Mexico City. Injured children from Gaza. We have our first injured children going to Portugal, the first kids going to Spain. So because the United States has stopped issuing visas for Palestinians, we're sending them to other places. We have medical missions going in on a regular basis to provide medical care on the ground. We're opening schools both in Egypt for displaced Palestinians, in Gaza itself. We're providing tutoring, we're providing scholarships. We have a wide variety of education programs and aid. We're running food kitchens in Gaza City, bakeries. We're rehabilitating clean water and water pumps, desalination plants. We are also running a amputee program for the thousands of children who are amputees, the orphan program for the thousands of kids who've been orphaned. We're doing it in a very holistic way. So not only do we provide them the basic needs, but we're also providing them mental health care, therapy, education, mental health support, and also medical care. We also are building a leadership program, as I mentioned. Our goal is to really rebuild new organizations that can take over for the kind of work that HEAL Palestine does. These will be Gaza-led organizations, and developing mentorship and training for leaders on the ground there is one of our main focus. To have them replace us and to be leaders in their own right. This is their cause. It's their country. We're here to support them, not to tell them what their needs are, but to support them and helping to identify their needs and being able to take on those programs themselves.
Yeah. Such a resource that's valuable, inspiring. You shared a little bit early on in terms of the social justice lens that you grew up around in Kent,
Yeah.
and what happened there. In terms of your first visit to Palestine, what inspired that trip?
Well, I mean, it was watching the Intifada
The
on the
first
ground. I
Intifada,
mean,
yeah.
yeah, the first Intifada, and seeing scenes of young people my age who were in the streets facing down soldiers armed with, M16s, armed with tanks, helicopters, jet airplanes. It was one of the strongest militaries in the world, and with rocks or with just their own bodies, sacrificing for freedom, something that I was born with. My forefathers had struggled for those rights that I had did not have to earn. I was all of us in this country we owe a debt to those who struggled for our freedom.
Mhm.
And yet that debt is to be paid to others who are struggling for the same cause, especially those who are oppressed by our government. And the reality is in Palestine that the occupation continues because of American support. That
Unfortunately.
the oppression of the Palestinian people is an American injustice. So as an American, I felt duty bound to stand up and try to undo some of the hardship, the suffering, the crimes that were being committed in my name, in our name, through our tax money and political support. So I was really very much committed. And then just by chance, I was selected. The ADC, the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee, at that time was doing a program called Eyewitness Israel. They were sending delegations over to the West Bank and Gaza to see for themselves what the conditions were on the ground, because the media was not giving a very, very accurate portrayal of what conditions were like under occupation. So that they did got around to doing college of activists, and just by chance, I was selected to go in the winter of 1988, and saw firsthand and experienced firsthand something that changed my life. Because it's one thing to study it at a university level, it's one thing to watch it on television, it's one thing to read about it in the New York newspapers. It's another thing to go and experience it firsthand and develop those human relationships and see with your own eyes what occupation looks like, what a child in the intensive care with a gunshot injury to the head looks like, what a family who are living in a tent because their home was destroyed by an Israeli bulldozer, simply because were being punished for the acts of someone else. To see that and experience that firsthand was something that changed my life forever, and that gave me the energy and the commitment to dedicate my life to this cause.
In terms of choosing health, education, aid, leadership, tell us about the nonprofit landscape that focuses on Palestine. And of course, it's one thing to not only start one organization and do it well, but to have to do it a second time over, like reinventing yourself, and coming up with a new brand, a new institution, a broader scope. For those who are listening who maybe have started their own nonprofit or want to, what are some of the things that went into that decision, aside from the differences from the previous institution that you wanted to make, but you recruited other people in your inner circle to be on the board, and people that you trust and see the same vision as you. But if you wanted to do it over again, or now that it is, only a few years old, like what are some of the things that you're learning this second time around and using I want to say, wisdom from the previous institution, and like carrying that forward?
Yeah, I learned a lot of hard lessons with my experience with PCRF. Obviously, when you found and build an organization,
Yeah.
there's always that challenge of having the founder syndrome, which is that this is my organization, I'm in charge, I'm the boss. Everything I say is the law, and that's
Mm,
not how I ran PCRF. I mean, I was
sure.
very much aware and conscious of that. I very much believed in delegating leadership roles, giving people
Of
space to be
course.
leaders themselves. And this is a Palestinian organization. I very strongly believe Palestinians should lead. They should take responsibility for decisions. And that's how I founded the organization and built it. I did not. There is a role for the board of directors. It's governance,
Hmm.
and the board has a very clear and strict responsibility to make sure that I'm doing my job and to help support and guide me and give me the resources to lead and to make sure that I'm leading, following best practices. But that's not what happened, unfortunately. I learned the hard way that the board had other intentions, which did not meet how boards should govern nonprofits. So in that sense, I decided that to fulfill what I wanted to do, to serve this cause, I had to start over, which is hard because, PCRF has enormous resources. With the kind of resources that they have, you can do amazing things. You can rebuild entire
Hmm.
hospitals. You can, have the resources to do anything you want, but it wasn't possible. And so, and the culture had changed. I really am a strong believer in empowerment and building a culture within an organization in which people feel inspired to work, that it's not a job for them, but it's a mission, it's a life mission,
Sure.
that they feel very connected to the cause and they feel ownership in the organization. I always was in the field, meeting with my staff in Jenin and Rafah and Jabalia, wherever, hearing what their needs were and trying to give them the resources and support they needed to do the job. They're the hard ones in the field working. So that was always my leadership style, and that was not something that was welcomed by over time. By a board, to answer your question, is the lessons that you learn is that you really need to have people who share your values and who have governance experience. You need people who have nonprofit governance experience on the board. And that's not something I had before. The board was not made up of people who understood what governance means. And so when we started Heal Palestine, we were very clear to not make the same mistakes that happened with PCRF. And a lot of it happened towards the end. After my wife passed away, the organization became much bigger. Her passing and the organization's growth as a result of people knowing her story and being aware of the organization's mission and impact. That also changed the culture in the organization from a board perspective as well.
Mhm.
We're not going to allow that to happen. We're here to serve a cause. None of us are bigger than the cause, none of us are bigger than the mission, and none of us are bigger than the organization that we're serving as well. So we want people on board who understand that. And, especially during this time when people in Gaza are struggling just to find food, mothers can't feed their children, people are living in tents for years. Kids are not being educated. Children who are sick don't get health care. Children go to bed hungry every single night. They're traumatized. There's thousands of kids missing limbs. It's not a time for us to worry about, who gets credit or, who's the person speaking at an event, or it's my turn to be the person who gets their name on the flyer. It's not that. We're here to be in service of a cause, and so you have to bring those people in, and they have to fit that culture. And if there's any signs in which people are moving away from that and thinking more from a personal point of view, you have to identify that early on and not let it change the culture of the organization. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it comes down to leadership and it comes down to culture. And the culture is set by the leadership, but it's also part of every person who's involved in the organization, whether they're a volunteer, whether they're staff, whether they're people who are involved in the organization at even a minimal level. They have to be sharing that vision and that culture that's set by leadership, but also the leadership practices it every single day. So if the question was advice to young people starting nonprofits or people who want to get involved in this kind of work,
Mhm.
obviously, there's so much work to be done. I really think people should, when you start small and build. Do not take on a huge undertaking. I started with one child that came to the US for treatment, and then two, and then four, and then six, and then 10. And then by that time I said, I need a nonprofit. I started that without a nonprofit. I was doing it just, within the communities where these kids were being sent.
Yeah.
And then when I saw that, okay, it's something that has some legs that can become a program of getting these kids medical care and empowering our communities and rebuilding their lives, then I realized, okay, this is something a nonprofit should be. Um, it should be under the umbrella of a nonprofit. And that's how we started PCRF. So I would say first think about the mission and what area you want to address. See who's doing the same work. I would not try to duplicate others as far as programs unless there's a need that's not being met. And then, work with others as well. The one thing we do in HEAL is that we partnership with a lot of organizations, a lot of people, both on the ground in Palestine and anywhere else where there's a need. We try to not to do things just in silos, but to have the opportunity to share resources and to have a bigger impact. So if you're looking to get started, I think the main focus is really just you have to be truly dedicated. You have to give your heart and soul to the program. You have to work day and night. The resources that are available today are vastly superior than what I started with. There was no internet, there were no cell phones, there were
Sure.
no
Yeah.
laptop computers. I'm going back to the late 80s. But it was also that was great because I learned the hard way to do everything. And you have to be ready to do everything. You have to wear every single hat, whether it's even sleeping on couches or sweeping the floor or going to the post office and standing in line, whatever it is, you have to build that trust. And the most important thing is the name and reputation that you have. You have to keep your reputation. And that's one of the reasons I started HEAL and left PCRF is I don't want my reputation at all to be damaged with a change in a culture that I didn't agree with.
Right.
So therefore, to give up an organization that had at that time 40, $50 million in the bank, um,
Uh,
that wasn't important to me. What was important to me was how that money was being spent or not spent.
sure.
Donors gave money because they wanted to help people. They didn't want
Yeah.
it to be sitting in a bank account. So when people give you money, they expect you to use it for to help people.
Yeah.
So that's the reputation right there. I can't go and ask people, hey, donate, and then just put it in a bank account or invest it or accumulate it and not spend it. And then when people come to you and say, well, I'm sorry, that's not we don't do that. We only help children. We don't help adults. We don't do education and we don't feed people or something like that.
Right.
I can't answer that. I can't answer people like that. I have to say
Mhm.
anything we can do to help anybody, we will do our best to do it. We may not be able to solve every person's problem because the problems are immense. Some do not have solutions. Some of the solutions are not available locally. But if there's something we can do, if there's a family who needs bread or food or a tent or water or clothing or education or mental health therapy or eyeglasses for their child or a hearing aid or a prosthetic limb or a life-saving surgery, if there's anything we can do and we have the ability to do it, we have to give full effort for it. Even just for, I'll give you a story of how we work as an organization, meaning that we
Please.
don't say no. We have a boy that came, his name was Islam. I think he's 8 years old, and he lost his foot in a bombing in Gaza. The Israeli army, the Israeli Air Force hit his home and his home was destroyed, and his foot was amputated. And he came to Raleigh, North Carolina, for treatment with his mother, and then went back to Egypt after he got his prosthetic limb and was waiting to get back into Gaza. She had, I think, 6 or 7 children and her husband in Gaza. Well, while they were in Egypt, her home in Gaza was bombed, or their tent was bombed, or their uncle's home, I'm not sure, wherever the family was staying was hit again in an airstrike, and the father was killed. And several of the children were injured, but now they were orphaned. Their mother was in Egypt. The children's father, who was taking care of them in Gaza, was killed. So the children are orphaned in Gaza City, and their mother's in Egypt, not able to come back and take care of them. So we worked for months and months to get the family out of Gaza to be reunited with their mother so she could take care of them. You can imagine how traumatized these kids are. They're all between the ages of like 7, 8 years old up to their mid-teens. And just last week, we were able finally to get them out into Egypt. And now they're reunited with their mother in Egypt. That's where, in my previous organization, never would they have tried to. I would have gone and fought long and hard to try to get that done. And I would have been, they would have been, no, it's not under our purview. It's not under our mandate. For us in HEAL, we said, yes, of course, we have to try to reunite the mother with her children. This is the minimum that we should be trying to do for them. And now they're under our care in Egypt. We have them in an apartment. We're taking care of them. We provide them the food. We provide them the support that they need. The kids will go to school. They'll have everything that they need. They've suffered enough. They don't need to also live in abject poverty and to suffer from the lack of care or support. Love, compassion, kindness, that's the core values of our organization. We don't say no to anybody. We don't always have solutions to everybody, but we always try our best.
That's really wonderful and heartwarming to hear. In terms of like, collaborating on the back end in terms of implementation partners, and you probably have amassed a network, yourself over the last few decades. What would you say is, the logistical framework if you were to take a look under the hood of a international NGO? Some people understand fundraising, some people understand programs, some people
Yeah.
understand finances. But what does it take to kind of have a successful operation?
Is that you identify where your strengths and weaknesses are and you bring in people who can fill those gaps. I don't have strengths in a lot of areas, but I make sure that the people who are coming in on finance and accounting, who are coming in on operational levels on the ground, are experts in that area. And your job is just to get them the resources they need, the support they need, that they can continue, that they can do the work that the organization is what our mission is. So it's really important that you fill those gaps with the right people, not just friends or family, not just relatives. Another reason I left my previous organization is that you bring in the right people and you make sure those people are qualified and that they fit the culture and the mission of the organization. So, if you're strong in one area, that's great. If you're strong in a few areas, that's great. The areas that you're not strong in, bring those people in that can do that work for you.
Yeah. Uh, I see a lot of similarities in that and kind of like the genesis for AMCF in terms of being able to delegate and bring on people who are passionate, that care about the mission, that have an expertise in an area that I may not be. So I co-sign everything you just said.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of what you feel is the most pressing need today, it's been an ongoing genocide and issue and doesn't seem like it has an end in sight. And, I only pray that in our lifetime, it's something that is resolved,
Yeah.
and that peace can enter into Palestine, and that people can go back to their homes and rebuild and all of the above.
Yeah.
You're so close to the work, you're intertwined in it. You may have a perspective of hope because you see the progress being done on some ways, but then also I'm sure you have a very jaded perspective as well. So feel free to share some insights into your thought process around what's needed to change and what can we do to help.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a hard question too, because obviously there's always the large kind of macro. What's needed is freedom for the Palestinian people. What's needed is an end to occupation, and to all the crimes that are being committed, and to the idea that one people have privileges and rights over another people based on their religion, ethnic identity, or nationality. And that's the core issue here. Now, we're not going to change that. So on a micro level, this is where we, as people who want to come in and have an impact, have to identify areas that we can have an impact. And so therefore we have to look at, you're asking what's the biggest need. The biggest need on is in every aspect. The entire education system has been destroyed. So education is a huge need. The health
Yeah.
sector has been destroyed. So rebuilding the health sector and giving them the resources to be able to provide treatment for every kind of patient, not just the injured children who need care by the thousands, but also people who have everyday ailments, who have, conditions which prior to October 7th were being treated easily inside of Gaza. You need to rebuild that system. People are living now on their second year of living in tents, the kind of thing you go camping for a week in the forest and you're sick of it after that time. People are living for years in tents now, children. Everything is needed in Gaza. So to identify one singular one is very difficult. So instead of focusing on one singular thing that we need to work on, because all of those need to be worked on, and each one of them needs a huge amount of resources, attention, and focus. I would say what's needed is to show hope, solidarity to the people there, that they feel that they're not forgotten, that the lives of their children matter, that when you kill 20,000 or more innocent, beautiful Gaza children, Palestinian children, Arab children in Gaza, that we as human beings outside, whose governments are doing these things by supplying the weapons and the political support for it to be done, that we show the people there that we are not with that, that we recognize the humanity of the Palestinian people, of the Gaza people, that we stand with them, that we show that we are that we are going to do all we can to help heal their wounds. And what we can do is, in any capacity, to educate them, to feed them, to house them, to heal them, to give them the love and support, and to show them that we are not going to stand idly by during this historic moment, during this historic crime, and allow it to happen. We're going to stand up and do all we can to show them we care, and that we're going to give our attention and focus for their children and for their better future. I think that has a huge impact. I'm
Yeah.
in touch with my staff every single day in Gaza, and the one thing that inspires them the most is to know that the world outside cares about them, and that's what helps keep them going. So any act of solidarity, any act of compassion, any act of kindness, of support goes such a long way to the people there and helps them keep going every single day.
Yeah. Um, I can only imagine just on a, personal level, being able to have staff there and connect with them and, not knowing the severity of what could happen next. I'm sure through your experience, there have been
Yeah.
many people that have been personally afflicted, whether it was themselves or their family members. Um, so, my prayers go out to you in terms of like having to be a leader that holds that space.
Yeah.
And, I think many people want to do well, but they're not in a situation where they can give money here, they can maybe volunteer their time. I know many physicians who've gone on these medical trips, um, but beyond that, I think there's like a sense of hopelessness and a sense of, um, I don't want to call it apathy, but it's a sense of like no matter what we do, it doesn't feel like it's getting better. So for people who have that framework or maybe have lost that sense of being able to make a change, what would you say to them if you had a moment to speak to them?
I think you have to recalibrate your perspective on how change works. You know, we aren't able to end the occupation, end the siege of Gaza. We're not able to change Israeli society to be more kind, to be more tolerant, to be more equitable. Those are things that if that's what you're focusing on, that as a human being or as an activist or as a physician, of course you're going to be in despair. Of course you're going to be despondent. Of course you're going to get cynical and almost turn your eyes away because you feel you have no role. What you should be focusing on and what we can focus on are ways that we can have a positive impact. As I said,
Mhm.
last year we brought 60, last 2 years we brought 63 children injured to the United States. In communities everywhere, until today, we still have around 20, 25 children in the United States being treated who are opening their homes and taking care of them, who are taking them to their appointments, who are giving them all the support they need every single day to heal. We have a 12-year-old girl in Seattle had both of her legs blown off above the knees. She's a double amputee. Every day, there are dozens of people in Seattle who are, what does she need? What can I take her? I'm taking her to an appointment. She's
Sure.
going to the dentist. She's learning to walk
Yeah.
again. She's getting her prosthetic fixed. And they're busying themselves with that. And that's what they should be doing. That's what makes
Right.
that girl whole again. That's what's going to give her a future. That's what's going to help rebuild her life. And that's what's going to help heal us as human beings who've been witnessing some of the worst crimes in modern history, if not the worst crimes in modern history. So, with that being said, we have to, if your focus is, well, I'm never going to see freedom in Palestine. I'm never going to see the end to this horrific crime being committed, then of course you're going to be in despair. But if you say, well, if I'm a doctor and I can go and operate on 5 people or 10 people or 20 people in Gaza, you should be proud of that. You should consider that a noble purpose and also a great achievement. And you should continue that if that's your skill set and that's what you can do. If you can donate and help these injured children get medical care, that's great. We need that. Those are the resources that heal these children. If you can be involved as an activist, as a volunteer in any capacity, that's where you have to keep going. The people in Gaza haven't given up yet. They don't have the luxury to give up. The
Wow.
luxury
Yeah.
that we have to just say, oh, well, it's too much for me. I'm so depressed by it. That's, just such a privilege that the people in Gaza, the people in Palestine don't have. So we should not use that privilege of saying, I'm not going to continue to serve and to help and to support and to heal. You should focus every day on what can I do to make their lives better? How can I show them that they're loved? How can I show the mothers there that the lives of their children matter? And I think that's, if you look at it from that perspective, you're going to find ways that you can have an impact and feel value in how your time is spent and feel very rewarded. And I think that's how we have to look at it. So it's just a recalibration of your consciousness.
I appreciate that perspective. For me personally, I've only been to Palestine once and got to visit Al-Quds and a few other Bethlehem and a few other
Yeah.
locations. Um, in April of 2023, it was Ramadan and Laylatul Qadr. And coming from that experience, I just had this sense of responsibility to never be quiet about what's happening in Palestine. Um, and lo and behold, 6 months after that, the world knew what was happening. So for me, it's personal because I had that one experience. But for so many other people, it's even more personal because it's their families, it's uh, you know, their experience.
Yeah. Their
So
lives. Yeah.
what little I can do through AMCF to support organizations like Heal Palestine, I myself want to do more. Um, so I hope that, people listening to this will give to Heal Palestine, they'll volunteer with Give Palestine wherever they are in
Yeah.
their communities, and be able to support the Palestinian people.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, there's a lot of great organizations out there. I mean, I think donors or people who want to help should really do their due diligence on
Of
organizations,
course. Yeah.
and and we want to stand up to a very high level of scrutiny, as all organizations should. This is a very important time in Palestinian history and world history. And there are people who we've seen already who are taking advantage of the suffering of the Palestinian people to benefit themselves, or to not maximize the impact that they could or should have. So we doesn't have to be Heal Palestine. There's many ways to get involved. We appreciate your help and appreciate your support and give
Hmm.
people an opportunity on a grassroots level to get involved and to heal themselves. But I think the important thing is to do something. And
Right.
we had the same experience, your trip to Palestine and my trip to Palestine, however far apart they were on the calendar, were very
Sure.
similar because it was a very
Yeah.
moving experience where you commit yourself to a people who opened their hearts and their lives to you and probably
Absolutely.
treated you with such kindness, and then
Yeah.
had to go back and living lives that were so difficult and so hard because of our government and because of our policies outside.
And so privileged the fact that I can go to Al-Quds and so
Yeah,
many people who are there less than a mile away cannot.
yeah,
Right. Um, so
yeah,
you know,
yeah. In
I
their own
think
homeland, in their own homeland.
right, right.
Yeah,
And to have the checkpoints there and to have to deal with the Israeli occupying forces there, um, it just baffles me that
yeah.
we live in 2026 where this injustice happens on a daily basis for people that don't deserve it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right.
so I know that's like a somber way to kind of put a pin in that, but I want to offer you a opportunity to maybe share something that you didn't get a chance to earlier, or if there's anything else that you want people to know, and can maybe tie it on a high note.
Eh, well, I think the high note is that for generations, there's been an effort to break the spirit of the Palestinian people through the use of violence, through the use of oppression and tools of oppression, and it hasn't worked. Not only have the Palestinians' desire for freedom and struggle for freedom continued, but the spirit and the humanity of the Palestinian people is as strong as ever. And anybody who goes to Palestine will tell you that the people there continue to they've kept their humanity.
Mhm.
They are rooted to their land, they're rooted to their cause and to each other. And therefore, it's up to us outside, who live with such privilege, to stand with them and to serve them and to support them to the best of our ability. And in many struggles like the Palestinians, people have been broken, causes have been destroyed. And we're at an existential point for the Palestinians today with the government in Israel, who's committed seemingly as never before, to removing violently the Palestinians from their ancestral land. Um, the, a crime against humanity, a war crime. It's up to us to respond with love, with compassion, but most of all with solidarity and with real work that makes a real impact. And whatever your skill set is, whatever your resources are, whatever your abilities are, there's always a way to be involved, whether you're a high school student up to a retired someone at the end of their long and hopefully prosperous life. There's always a way for people to do something and to have an impact. So that's the message, and that, our my life is a testament to that. I started an organization from nothing. I was married to an amazing Palestinian woman for 17 years. I watched her die. I had two small children to raise as a widower. I didn't give up. I found another amazing woman. I started a new organization, and this isn't about me, but it's to show you that there is hope even in the darkest moments. And this is truly a dark moment, but I don't feel that it's hopeless. I feel as long as the Palestinian people have their spirit, have their energy for freedom, and their commitment to stay human, that there's hope for freedom and there's a hope for this madness to end.
Inshallah, I mean, may Allah protect you, your family, your staff, your loved ones, and continue to increase Heal Palestine and the wonderful work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate your kind words.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Steve. It was a pleasure chatting with you. And again, everybody who's listening, do your part to learn more about Heal Palestine.
Yep. www.healpalestine.org. Easy to find.
Wonderful. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
brother. Yep. Bye.